Hi, everybody. Welcome to this amazing event with Dr. Sue Morter. I've called it Invisible Healing because that's a lot of the work that I do and the work that Dr. Sue does. And if you don't know her, you really need to. She is the remarkable healer who has created a whole system that she calls energy codes. And she's written a book by the same name. And she is a worldwide speaker. She's wanted in every country, basically. Also my good friend. So welcome, Sue. Great.
My pleasure to be here. So that's not wanted like from the FBI or anything. It's just, we're just having a great time.
Wanted that we really want to listen to you, because I've listened to you sometimes and you are mesmerizing. So I want to just start. I'm really fascinated and have become more and more fascinated by how thoughts and words are really central to healing. So, and I've seen you in action, Sue, and that is a part of some of the things that you do with energy. But let's just talk, let's get basic for a bit. What do you mean by when you say energy codes, and what do you mean by energy when you're doing healing?
Sure. Well, the whole of the manifest world is energy. Everything is energy, everything. So the chair that someone might be sitting in right now is also energy. The body that they are using as a vehicle to navigate this third dimension is energy. All physical matter is just compressed energy. And so when we speak about healing or we speak about mastering energy, it's really about how can we start to identify as this energy ourselves and learn to work with it. So the energy codes are a series of principles and practices that people can utilize together to be able to become masterful at the energy that flows through the human system, the bioenergetics, meaning body energies. So if we are sick, those bodily energies are blocked and they're not flowing the way that they're supposed to. If we are healing, if we are healthy, strong, robust, and vital on any level of our lives, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, it is because that energy is able to flow in the ways that it is designed to be flowing. So the energy codes are a codified way of being able to embody ourselves as this energy being, this invisible spirit energy that we are, into this physical realm, this physical end of the spectrum. So just lastly, let me just say this. If you took all of the energy that exists and started compressing it, eventually you would get to physical form. So our thoughts and our emotions are just before that energy becomes so compressed to be physical tissue. And so the more we awaken to our ability as healers, what we're doing is kind of waking up to more of the spectrum that we are, rather than just thinking we are this physical being that's trapped inside of these five senses and that's it. So I'm so excited about diving into this conversation because it is near and dear to my heart as well, Lynn. This is where we need to go as a humanity if we're going to become more masterful at being healthy and robust and vital and fulfilled in our lives and being able to help others as well.
That is such a great summing up, Sue. And that is so close to my heart too, because this is the problem. We are trapped in a really old paradigm. And that paradigm really limits us because it basically says we're a blob of electricity and chemical signaling. And we are so much more than that. We may know that when we're children, we have a sense of the miraculous and the miraculous abilities we have and the power of things like our thoughts to affect matter. But that gets drilled out of us through our teachers, through our parents often, and eventually, and through modern science. And eventually we start believing it. And that just essentially limits us and really limits healing. And one of the things that I've been so fascinated about, of course, is thought as one more energy. And thought, we know this from a lot of the science of the new science of, it's not so new, it's like 40, 50 years ago, and the quantum science was 100 years old. But understanding, as you say, Sue, that everything is energy, including our thoughts. We now know that thoughts are essentially things that affect other things, and they can be measured. People like Dr. Fritz Albert Popp, the late Fritz Albert Popp, who who discovered biophoton emissions, that human beings and all living things emit a tiny current of light. He found, and other people working on his systems, like Dr. Gary Schwartz of the University of Arizona, found that when healers were sending out healing, the light emissions from their dominant hand, which they measured with special equipment, actually grew brighter, were increased, and they could measure it, and measure an increase of photon by photon, that they were increasing. So thoughts and healing seem to be intricately connected. So this brings me to something else, Sue, which is diagnosis. I worry about the whole idea of diagnosis as a hexing of a lot of people, because there is a fascinating story of a British guy who was going to a hospital in London and doing really well. And he actually had a low-level form of leukemia, but he was doing really well. Doctor was giving him some medicine, but he didn't even know what he had. Doctor was just saying, oh, you're doing really well, and come back, and blah, blah, blah. So he came back, and one day he saw his notes, and he read upside down that he had leukemia. So he saw the doctor's notes. And that guy, I kid you not, this was recorded as a case, was dead in a week. He was dead because of his diagnosis. So tell me a little bit about, what do you do? What do you think about when you see somebody? I mean, you're looking at them and diagnosing in a different way.
So for 30 years, I was in a clinical setting where people would come to me and I would do an examination, a neurologic, orthopedic, structural evaluation, a biochemical evaluation, to see where they were functioning and what was happening. And early on in my career, just coming out of school, I had to go through a differential diagnosis and figure out exactly what was going on here. And I soon recognized that the moment that I came to a conclusion, there was an energetic shift inside my own system, which I actually didn't care for the way that it felt. Now, keep in mind that I was raised in a family of energy medicine. Quantum science was the conversation around our dinner table. I grew up seeing this energy that we're referring to. I shut it down when I was about 7 or 8 or 9 years old, because I was talking about it all the time and nobody knew what I was talking about. So I could see it was making people uncomfortable. So I shut it down. Then later in my 20s, I tried to get it back and I couldn't. And then another 10 years later, I opened up in meditation to a transcendent experience, a multidimensional experience, and my ability to see the energy returned. So along the way in all of that, I began stopping giving diagnoses to patients when they would come to me, because the moment that they recognized that they had something, now they had it. And prior to them having it, they just had a series of symptoms that they were looking to have some solutions about. They were curious about what was going on with them. They were in pain. They were dysfunctioning in some way. And as I started not seeing the patient as someone who had this condition, and I started looking to the whole person when I would walk into the treatment room with them, I started noticing that they became more free. They became free to heal. They became free to own their own magnificence and their capacity to heal themselves. We started focusing eventually even not on healing, but actually just coming to know the wholeness of their being, starting to embrace parts of themselves that they had shoved under the bus or put into a box because they were told that they weren't very creative, or they were told that they weren't able to do things that they wanted to do. All of the ways that we get shut down over the course of our lives. And when I started reaching inside these individuals and cultivating these parts that had been shut down or suppressed in some way, or perhaps never even allowed to develop because of how the individual was raised or the circumstances that they were in, then people started healing faster. They started staying better longer. And circumstances that were headed down a road that didn't have a very pretty picture associated with it in terms of a prognosis began to make a left-hand turn, and people began to shift dramatically. So I began to operate in this way. Thoughts that we think, the words that we say, the approach that we're coming from when we're working with a client or with a patient have everything to do with what gets to happen in that space in between us. And, as you know, Lynn, the expert on the power of intention, that our come from is everything. Let me just give a brief example to people that might be, wondering, what does this mean? 20 years ago, there was a new diagnosis in town, and everyone was getting the diagnosis of fibromyalgia. So a patient would go to a doctor and say, I hurt in every fiber of my muscles. And I need to know what's wrong. And so the doctor would then do an examination, evaluation, and the doctor would say back to them, you have fibromyalgia. Now, keep in mind that the word fibro means fiber, myo means muscle, and algia means pain, inflammation and pain. So the patient basically was saying, I have pain in every fiber of my muscles. And then the doctor was basically saying back to them, you have pain in every fiber of your muscles. And then the patient would say, oh, I'm so glad to know that I knew something was wrong. And now I know that I have fibromyalgia. And I would just shake my head and realize that what was happening was we were creating another reality, something that is a thing, and handing it to a patient. And now the patient is having to carry that thing around in their lives. Whereas if we would just not do that part and just go to work with what is happening with the whole system that is not allowing this person to be self-healing and self-revealing and self-illuminating, and et cetera, be self-sufficient, and start to go to work on what's that about, what's going on right there, then everything began to change. So I'll stop there and see where you are.
Absolutely. And that is so brilliant that you came to realize it. What I'm fascinated by too is that you were feeling it in your body, this need to limit somebody to a diagnosis. And with the diagnosis, of course, comes the prognosis. You've got 3 months to live or whatever. Now, let's just, everybody out there, let's just think about this for a second. I'm really interested in the work of Ted Kapchuk. He is an acupuncturist and a professor at Harvard Medical School. And his life's work has been the placebo. Now, he did this study some years ago where he gave a group, he got together a group of patients who had really severe carpal tunnel syndrome, really in pain. So he gives half of them a painkiller and the other half get acupuncture. And he notes that about a third of the people were suffering so much with side effects from either side that they took to their beds. The other 2/3 were essentially much, much better. And here's the kicker of it. The people who were getting a pain pill were actually getting cornstarch. And the people who were getting acupuncture were actually getting retracted needles. So they were getting nothing. What they were getting was healing words. What they were getting was permission to heal. They were getting, here's some medicine to heal. And that whole idea, and he's done so many studies like that, even giving patients a pill, a bottle of pills that says placebo on it, handing them that, and the patients get better. So what is that saying? It's saying that healing essentially is a thought. It's a thought. And maybe it's a thought coming from the healer and the healee, and some sort of incredible thought interaction that is the real healer in the situation. And so what I loved about what you said, Sue, was this refusal to characterize how that illness is going to go by giving it a label. I mean, I think that's a really powerful thing. I certainly saw it in our family's life with my mother-in-law. who had end-stage breast cancer. And she was too late to get any kind of conventional treatment when she finally admitted this and went to her general practitioner, who gave her 3 months to live. And we brought her to an integrative practitioner, really a holistic practitioner we knew about. And when he examined her, I was in the room. I mean, her breast was essentially raw meat. And the GP had recoiled from it. But this guy, Dr. Patrick Kingsley, his name was, just looked at it and he said, oh, we can handle that. Oh, we can handle that. And I thought that was it. That was the medicine. That hope was the medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit more, this constriction that you felt. Why did you feel so constricted by the word diagnosis?
Mm-hmm. You know, what happens is that we get involved in the story. And I was now contributing to a story that someone was going to have to put themselves inside of, a box that they were going to have to live inside of. And I just knew that there was a much greater capacity for the miraculous, which is actually just opening the mind to the infinite possibilities that are here for us and allowing it to be true for us too. When we accept that in a me too kind of way, then the universal field, the unified field has an opportunity to come in through an opening in our individual system. And if our individual system is open to that, then we get to benefit from things that we never would have thought of. When our hearts are involved in an intention, the capacity for that intention is quantumly enhanced. And so if I was giving them a diagnosis, their hearts were shrinking. They were shoving down their ability. The bright light that they came into this life as was being dimmed. It was being, caged up and put in a box. And I could see this energetically because of what was happening in my own evolution and my own awakening that was occurring as my sight of this energy was able to return. And I was having these multidimensional experiences. I could see in an instant that this was not flourishing. It was not life and affirming. It was a quickening that was happening of sorts, but there wasn't an opening amidst the quickening. And here's what I mean by that. The focus that happens when we take a placebo, even if we know it's a placebo, all of our attention is in a single point of conscious focus at one time. And we take the placebo, and it's actually what's happening there is a focusing of the mind to a tiny spot. So all of us, all of who we are, is gathering its attention. And it's empowering by impacting into this single point of consciousness that we are working with as a pill in a placebo or a deep heartfelt intention or wherever and however we are directing our mind. So I began to recognize that working with the raw energy itself was more important than naming it. That once we name it, we separate ourselves from it. And now I'm over here and this thing is on top of me, this diagnosis. So this condition, this disease, and that separation disempowers us from ever being able to do anything about it, because the story goes that people die from this condition, or people have this condition for decades, or they have to learn how to live with this condition, etc. And that is one of the most frightening things that we can do to the mind field, is to give it parameters like that when it has an ability to do something more fantastic for us. So we have to quicken and focus, but we can't close off. We have to remain open while we're gathering our attention. When we close off those infinite amount of possibilities that we end up calling miracles, but they're really not supposed to be miracles. It's supposed to be the way that we're living and what we're allowing to be. we've just created a world for ourselves that is completely boxed in. So when I was feeling this in my own body, when I would engage in a conversation that was starting to constrict energies in me, I could tell I wasn't in alignment with the greatest healing power on the planet that I had been aligned with at other moments in my own meditation or when I was working with the client, etc. So I stopped doing anything that caused that contraction and allowed my system to remain focused and intentional, but not closed off in a box that we just created for this patient by giving them this story it called a diagnosis. So started happening there was everything began to change.
That is just so interesting, because I think that, when you look at the healer-healee experience together, the thing that really does disturb everything is the diagnosis. And from the patient's point of view, I mean, I have my own story, which was pretty fascinating because, as Dr. Sue knows, I had some problems walking for a couple of years. I was born with some sort of hip dysplasia that didn't bother me most of my life until the last couple of years. And so in the search for what I eventually, got sorted, but in the search for that and looking for the right kind of healer to work with, I started getting really fascinated by their languaging, because their languaging was so disempowering. If I wasn't the rather rebellious person that I am and audacious person I am usually, I would have been really deflated. But I actually started using this as material. And I talk about this in the course I'm about to give, Become a Better Healer with a Power of 8, which is for practitioners. But in this journey, it was fascinating. I was taking notes of people who were otherwise excellent healers, who were saying things to me like, this is going to be a long and painful journey, Lynn. Or, this, or if they were examining me, they'd say, this hurts, right? And I'd say, no, it doesn't hurt. But they were sure it did. Or, you've got scoliosis. And I said, I'm pretty sure I don't have scoliosis. I've been checked out. No, I don't think that's it. And so it went. And finally, I think my favorite one was, you're a shadow of your former self. I was walking around the park today and I saw a guy doing silhouettes, and I felt like getting my silhouette done and sending it to that practitioner and saying, here's the shadow. I've dropped it.
That's a shadow.
That's the shadow. But I just thought, wow, as I say, if I hadn't been the fairly rebellious spirit I am, this would have crushed me. It would have limited me. It would have determined what happened to me. Yeah. And I think that is the element. I think that practitioners of all types don't really realize this is all unconscious. These are all, or inadvertent. These aren't people who want to hurt their patients, but they've been, the whole idea of telling the patient the truth, being truthful with the patient, has been drilled into practitioners so much that people don't really think about what that actually means. Yeah. If thoughts are energy, and if thoughts are things, and if we are all energy, then somebody sending that kind of limiting thought can prove fatal, as it was with that guy in that British hospital. Yes, so, that's what I feel about talking and languaging and even thinking among practitioners. So I have another question for you, Sue. When you're thinking about, so you don't use the language, but when you're thinking about about a patient that you're dealing with, what thoughts work best for you? Or do you try not to think at all? What's happening in terms of your thoughts?
Yeah. When I'm actually working with someone, either with hands-on or even the remote healing that I do, I oftentimes am just having my mind focusing on this flow that I'm working with, and allowing it to drop to the earth through this system, rise up through me, and project in whatever way I am focusing it in the work that I'm doing with someone. I'm simply just witnessing that, allowing that to be true, and feeling the potency of that energy moving. And so my mind isn't thinking happy thoughts. It's just being present with what is. It isn't thinking heal the problem, because I don't believe that it's a problem. I don't see it as a problem. Now, this comes from something that I speak about in what I'm teaching people. I wrote about it in the book that you mentioned, that we have to come from this place of radical wholeness. I call it the front side of the model. And we have to make this quantum flip into this radical space of recognizing that every single thing that happens in our lives is in our favor, even if we can't see it. In fact, especially when we can't see how this is benefiting me, then it has medicine in it for us to recognize that if I can change my come from, if I can change my perspective of life and what's happening here to a bigger picture perspective, I can actually start to see and allow all these things that are occurring in my life to be to my benefit. And prior to me ever looking at them that way, they're not. But when I start running it through that kind of filter, it begins to reveal. And it actually takes us into a greater ability to be present and fully available to whatever is happening, so that we're not constantly trying to protect ourselves from this happening or that happening. We're available. Now, there are ways that people can go about becoming more comfortable so that they can be available to more things. And that's, of course, what we're talking about here, is learning and recognizing and remembering and realizing, hey, it's not about a story of good and bad. It's not about either or. It's about both and. It's about, there's not a problem here. And when I can start to look into myself and recognize that I have a greater capacity to be present with this situation than I ever knew I had, now we start activating these healing energies that were sitting dormant, just waiting for us to give them a chance to participate in the flow of this system. So when I'm working on someone, I'm seeing them as whole and complete. I walk into the treatment room, and when I was in my clinical days, now I'm traveling, not traveling so much, but teaching all the time. So I'm doing more remote healing and that type of thing. But the thought is on the infinite potential. The thought is with compassion to allow this individual to find that within themselves. My mind's attention is on wholeness, and it is on the celebration of discovering the parts of an individual that were being suppressed that led to their illness in the first place. The parts of an individual that have been keeping their innate, internal, natural healer to be able to become robust and expressing in all parts of their lives. I see them as whole and complete. I see them and know that they have the capacity to rise up in this life in health and vitality. And if they're not, there's a reason. And that reason is simply because of something they're not aware of, something they've misinterpreted in their lives, something they have drawn a conclusion of and are caught up in a story of their own. So if I can stay out of the world of story and just work with the raw energy that is flowing through this system and enhance it with love and celebration, then what happens is that healing energy inside of the individual does the same. We all know about resonance and coherence, and that if we're dialed into a certain frequency, we tap that frequency for other people. And when we're dialed into the most infinite potential, but we're embodying that for ourselves, then those that we are working with or intending for have a greater and greater capacity to tap that same universal healer within themselves, and they heal themselves. So
and that's the thing. That is the interesting part of it. They heal themselves. Now, one of the other things that I've been focusing on with the work that I do also is the thinking and the words of the patients, because it's not just the healer. This is a little dance that's going on. And in so many instances, in certainly the people that I've worked with over the years with Power of 8 groups and individually with the power of intention, they come, as you say, with a story. They come with a preconceived notion of whether or not they can heal. Or even if they're not aware of it, their thoughts are usually limiting, negative. You know, I mean, if I were to ask you out there to just write down what you're thinking next week, I can guarantee you that 75% of it, in most instances, if not more, is going to be negative self-talk. It's going to be, that's going to be the internal narrative, the narrative of your life that is crushing you from exhibiting all that you are, essentially. And then that is the thing that gets into the way also, oftentimes with a practitioner with healing. And it's often, you know, most of the time isn't really addressed, you know, in fact, is contributed to, as we said, with the kind of offhand comments, etc. Because any offhand comment of a practitioner is going to be magnified, you know, 100 times in that ill patient, because he's already feeling ill, she's already feeling ill, and that is just confirming to her that it's going to be hard, if not impossible, to get well again. So really part of the I think the skill of being a practitioner is also healing the thoughts of the patient too. And I don't, you know, I've certainly seen that with Power of 8 groups all the time. There is something extraordinary about a small group that enables people, gives people permission to heal, but also let's say it's 8 people in the Power of 8 group, 7/8 of the time they're sending intention to somebody else. And so that in itself, getting off of themselves, being part of this larger entity, this hyper mind state of a Power of 8 group, that becomes healing too. That just, I think the getting off of themselves is a really big piece of it. They get to be a healer as well, and to participate in this positive story, you know, this positive outcome. And as a result, I mean, I've seen thousands of cases of Power of 8 groups producing miracles, you know, with people with, you know, all kinds of conditions, including, you know, stage 4 cancer. We're working with 2 people with stage 4 cancer now, and, you know, it's turning around. And I believe they have other things they're doing, but I think the Power of 8 group is changing their thinking process. I'm watching one of the people in this Power of 8 group of mine, and I see that she came in with an expectation of pain, that she was going to be, her treatment was going to be painful. Her surgery was going to be painful. It was going to be tough. It was going to be a hard, hard road to go through. And what we worked on really was that she was going to go through it with ease. And she has. And she's astonished. She's astonished. So in that case, changing the thinking changed the path, the healing path. Now, how about with you, Sue? What have you seen, before we start taking some questions, what have you seen with some of your patients in terms of thinking processes you've needed to work with?
You know, one of the things that I'm teaching people is to take their attention, their mind's attention, to their body. Whenever they're in a situation that has a charge for them, something upsets them, maybe the moment they received a diagnosis, maybe it was earlier than that in their life, which is what created the need for the diagnosis, created the symptoms, and caused them to go to the doctor and find out what's going on. When they think back about something that's happened in their life, or some disposition that they grew up with, or whatever the case may be, that rather than staying just in their head, but if they direct their mind's attention to the body, they will feel a knot in their throat, a tightness in their chest, or a lump in their stomach, etc. And it's trying to tell them something. It's telling them that the system isn't able to be working the way that it is intended. And so I direct their attention into their body. Where do you feel it in your body when you think about that situation from your past? Where do you feel it in your body when you think about the moment you received the diagnosis? Because we have to do some work there. So often one's energy field contracts so much the moment that they read upside down on the page that they have leukemia, or the doctor looks at them and points out their test results and tells them this story. They leave that conversation with a huge contraction. And so I'm teaching people how to, how to work with that and use it to their advantage, to learn to build more circuitry. And so when it comes down to what are the thoughts then that I would think instead of the upset, that I'm directing their attention into their wholeness as they're learning to breathe up and down through the body and do the things that they do with the energy codes. Their mind's focus has to be on infinite possibility, radical acceptance of the self, being in the love vibration. If this breathing of love through the body can happen, then healing happens faster. I find that the vibrational frequency of love is like the universal solvent, that all of these issues start to spring forth from an absence of self-love. So when the mind is focused on loving thoughts are of compassion, thoughts of tenderness, thoughts of intimacy, thoughts of deep care, coming home to the self in this sort of a way, all have a tremendous empowered ability to enhance the healing presence within. If we take this unified field and start compressing it all the way to physical form, if we decompress it all the way back out to the unified field, when we start the compressing, it starts a vibration. A vibration starts the moment we start compressing energy. That very first vibration generates a frequency. That first compression generates a vibrational frequency that we call love. So when we're loving, we're as close to being in the infinite possibility as is possible to still be in a body. So the power of love and intention is exponential. If our intention, if our thoughts are of love and compassion, not love and sorrow and pity and feeling badly for ourselves because of our diagnosis, but coming home to ourselves in a way that says, hey, I was put on this planet to have a full life experience, and I was given everything that I need to have that. And somewhere along the way, I got suppressed, or I got splatted and scattered and dispersed, or I got disoriented in some sort of a way. And now that's showing up as symptoms. And then I go to the doctor and they name the set of symptoms that go together and what we call a disease or a diagnosis. But they're just a collection of a chain reaction that started with, how do I believe in myself? How much is it here? How much am I letting that be true? The number one thing, as you said, Lynn, that I, ask people, what are you wanting from this course? When I start teaching a course on self-healing, whatever the case may be, or healing others, it's about, I need more self-confidence. I don't have faith. I don't have trust in myself. I need, I have so much pain in my body. I can't get optimistic. And what I know turns it around is when we climb inside and pick up where we left off. Somewhere along the way, we landed here, we splatted, we dispersed, and we became disempowered. And we started depending on the outer world to tell us who we are, including the diagnosis that they give us. And if we can just come back here and have a do-over, just begin again, everything begins to change. And this is what you're doing with your beautiful work, Lynn, by setting people into groups and allowing this power of intention and the power of collaboration to have an effect on us. It gets us out of our own stuff. I just glanced over here and saw this picture that I have from teaching, that we get into our own distortions versus sitting in our perfected biofield. And if I'm in this distorted state and I get in the company of someone who's even maybe not perfected, but a little less distorted or distorted in a different way, we can help each other find a way for this rising energy to find its way to express into this toric field flow, which allows for healing in the body. And when people are gathering in your groups of 8, Lynn, this is what's happening. Someone has had a difficult time here. Someone else has had an empowered experience with the same thing. Their energy fields are now influencing each other. And so we become more unified by gathering, and we have access to energies that we don't have access to alone at first. Now, ultimately, we do have the power in and of ourselves, but it sure is helpful if we can get a little support from our friends in the meantime that are also focused on our highest good. There's nothing like that.
No, I think, and I've looked at so many aspects of Power of 8 groups and what's healing about it and what practitioners can learn about this too. And I found it is really a fast track to entering oneness. I mean, that's certainly what the brainwave studies we've done on Power of 8 groups certainly show, that within a few minutes, people enter into a state that is essentially analogous to a Buddhist monk involved in ecstatic prayer, or a Sufi master involved with chanting. It looks nothing like meditation. It's another state. And I think what you're saying, Sue, is so right, which is if we can enter into a state which is the state we really are, a state of oneness. You know, we don't get to experience the field. You know, we don't get to feel that. We feel in our own little corporeal separateness all the time. That's where we live. But I think in a group healing and moving beyond this kind of, as you say, this separateness, this diagnosis, this sense of limitation, when you're part of a group, you leave all of that, you drop that. And I think this is what is empowering, I think, for practitioners, and some of the work that I'm doing with this course I teach, Become a Better Healer with the Power of 8, is showing practitioners that their patients will heal faster if they form their own groups. That's another healing capacity to work with. But to get them to understand that whatever they're doing, whatever kind of modality they use, can be enormously augmented by bringing in to bear everything we're talking about. So let me put my glasses on so I can take some questions and kick them to both of us. So
sure, absolutely.
I know we've got loads of people asking all kinds of questions. So please, everybody listening on the webinar, please feel free to write in. Easier for me to read them on the question and answer part. Okay, let's see. How do I change my thinking? I've never been in a love relationship. I'm 68 years old. I close my heart and don't know how to be vulnerable and intimate. I feel shame, says Liz.
So, you know, I just want to jump on this for a moment and say that relationship isn't required in order for you to know love. It isn't required. We also have the power of our imagination, and which is really what we're encouraging everyone to do when we're setting intentions and we're allowing this power of the focused mind to have a role in our lives. When we use our imagination, what would it feel like if I did know? What would it feel like if love could be in whatever way I would have it be? If I were to make up what love means to everyone, if I were to make up what humanity is supposed to understand about our empowered ability to heal, it feels like we're using our imagination, but we're really just remembering parts of ourselves that are outside of the box that started getting built as soon as we got here. And our parents started training us, and we started being, you know, compressed into something that was the best of intentions for everyone around us, but ultimately we're here to evolve up and out through that. So I would just say that as you feel shame, as you feel guilt, or you feel fear, or whatever those energies might be, know that those emotional states are just energies too. And if you will embrace them, there's actually something beautiful inside of them. Now, this is part of this radical wholeness idea that I'm speaking about. But if you're feeling shame or guilt, it's just an energy that's being interpreted in a certain way. And if you can just embrace it, then it sends a message to the subconscious that says, there's nothing wrong with this energy. And if I can embrace the energy, that energy will now become part of my whole field, that will actually be part of my groundedness and my wisdom and my ability to be present with any life circumstance. If I can be present with my own sense of fear, then I can be present with someone else's sense of fear. And once we're all doing that, we can hold a space for each other that is so much more stable and so much more allowing of life to be okay, and not something we have to outrun or protect ourselves from all the time. So I actually think it's an advantage if someone has not experienced something, if they've never had this, or they've never had that, or they don't know what it is. It's calling you to utilize your imagination and just say, okay, so I've never had that experience in the outer world. What would happen if I did? What would I want it to be if it did happen? And get to know what that energy would feel like. And it will be unaltered. It will show up exactly the way you want it. And you can utilize that energy as part of your own healing capacity. So limitation of experience is not truly a limitation. It's an invitation into using your own imagination and your heartfelt joy. In your heart of hearts, what would it be like if you did know what it means to be loved unconditionally, or what it means to be whole and full and fully accepted, in this world? Under those circumstances, different energies start activating, and those are the energies that start contributing to healing.
Fantastic. And Joanna, thank you, Sue. Joanna has asked, can energy fields influence each other on Zoom? If someone is disorganized and joins an online Power of 8 group, will their field be able to change in the presence of more organized fields in the group? Well, I'll take this one. I've run thousands of Power of 8 groups. All of the courses that I give with Power of 8 groups are all online. So people are meeting, but they're meeting virtually, and they're meeting, over great distances. We usually try to keep them in the same time zone, but they're meeting all the time virtually, and that works just as well. You don't have to be in person. And energy fields, all of the work that I've done on energy fields have demonstrated that we create a kind of psychic internet between people when we intend together. I've seen that with my intention experiments. We've done some experiments. I love the one I did from Sydney, Australia, where I had an audience there, and we were intending to make seeds grow faster in a set of seeds in Tucson, Arizona. And we had controls and all of that. And it worked, and it worked when we did this 5 other times. But the most interesting part of it was, we were 8,000 miles away. So we were creating that kind of change in those seeds 8,000 miles away. Undoubtedly, if somebody is feeling, in some way disorganized, not as coherent as someone else, plenty of evidence have shown the more coherent person can regularize the other. And when it's a whole group, it's that whole loving energy too, that altruistic energy, that where people, a group of strangers, imagine it, are sending intention, loving intention to you. And that is healing on every level. For our person who talked before about not ever feeling love, well, try a Power of 8 group. So here's something else. This is from Paula. She said, I was a dietitian before, and my liver transplant candidate was told she was too underweight for a new liver. I read in a paper the liver can grow back if we increase her food and avoid alcohol. She went from 35 kilos to 57 kilos before her transplant, when she was sent home to die by the surgical and medical team. She listened and believed, and she and I proved the team wrong. It was, of course, her belief, but totally possible, based on beliefs. Now, here's a question for you, Sue. From your point of view, it says from both our points of view, what happens spiritually with Alzheimer patients?
So one of the things that's happening is it's a very big question from a spiritual perspective. We're moving in and out of our own single point of focus. We're becoming less local with our mind field, and we're visiting other realm aspects of who we are, and we're kind of in between the worlds in some ways. And so when this is happening from a spiritual, holistic standpoint, if we look at this, and this is a conversation that I typically would have in a little bit deeper setting where we could set a context for this, but we're at the soulful level, preparing ourselves to move from dimension to dimension to dimension. And so from the third dimensional perspective, Alzheimer's is a problem, but from inside the Alzheimer's patient, if we were not giving them the cues that this reality or these altered realities that they are experiencing were wrong or not accurate or untrue, then they would actually have a more pleasant experience inside of this condition that they are living in, these circumstances that they are living in. So in other words, if if someone, just to really simplify this, if a little child is running down the street and falls and falls and, bumps their knees and their chin and everything, and they stand up, you'll notice sometimes they look around to see, am I okay? Or was this a bad thing? Or is this okay? And when the people come flooding to them saying, oh, no, I'm so sorry. This is so bad. Here, come here. Then it creates a story for them. It creates a reality. And now they're in a problem. Prior to that, it might not have been nearly as intense had people said, oh, this is okay. It happens all the time. Let's brush you off and let's keep going. And what happens under that vibrational shift of the environment around them has an impact on how they are interpreting the circumstances. Likewise, I've worked with lots of Alzheimer's patients who became so much more fluid and highly functioning inside of their homes, with their families and in their lives, when I would work with the family, which is literally a power of 8 type of setup. Work with the family to hold the space for this to not be a problem, become curious about what they're experiencing, ask them to share inside of their interpretation of what's happening in their reality, and watch them find a sense of peace and fluidity that allows them to stay present instead of everyone who's surrounding them all the time to constantly be concerned and worried and putting them into some kind of box that clearly they're not supposed to be in. It's not supposed to be that way for them, or it would be. So it's again part of this radical idea that we have to kind of walk ourselves in to be able to wrap our minds around that. But by engaging in these types of programs that Lynne and I are talking about, and this program that Lynne is offering us up here very soon, is a perfect way for us to learn how to hold such a space as if whatever is happening is okay, and to see it in its wholeness, and to see it in its flourishing capacity to be pink, healthy tissue, or highly functioning brain synapses, or a combination of a loving presence with creative capacity being enhanced, or whatever the person's circumstances are reflecting, that it is time for us to be enhancing in ways that allow these symptoms to melt away. The symptoms are just showing us how we've been managing the energy. They are a reflection back to us about how we're doing at accepting our wholeness. And so when you engage in a power of 8, the wholeness is more readily presented because your single mind is outnumbered. There's 7 more people holding a space that can come at it from another perspective and hold this pulsation together. It is a very real thing. The universe is pulsating, and we're either participating in that universal pulse, or we've separated ourselves off and are operating on a different frequency, a different bandwidth. And so when we engage in this larger way, all kinds of conditions, along with Alzheimer's, have an ability to be soothed and to be satiated and to be saturated in greater possibility. And then that same toric field flow that we were just mentioning, it gets to stabilize instead of being influenced by our own subconscious fears and history, our own story that we've been trapping ourselves inside of. So hopefully that's helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sue. Now, Maureen says, and Marino have 2 questions that I could answer together. They said, what do you suggest saying to people as they start to improve and then start the transition period of change, which can often feel uncomfortable? I'd love some tips on the language to use to explain this positively. And Marino is saying what to do if the intention isn't working, i.e. condition not improving. So with Maureen, what you're talking about is an expectation that people are they start to improve, then they're going to go through this transition period of change, which is going to feel uncomfortable. It doesn't have to be uncomfortable. This is the thing. I think it is, if you go back to the whole idea of pain and where it originates, pain is a whole process. It's a thought, essentially. And what they found with new research is that when someone takes a placebo, it affects the entire thought, emotional bandwidth of pain, but also the effect in the body. So the experience of pain, ow, this hurts. Well, that if that's a thought, that thought can be changed. And I'll give you an example with myself. I went through what is supposed to be one of the 10 top painful operations on both hips. And when I went in, I sort of made up my mind that I was going to enjoy this. You know, it was something I hadn't wanted to do, but I decided, okay, I have to do this. So I'm going to enjoy this. So I'm going to interact with the doctors. I'm going to say hi to the anesthetist. I'm going to be smiling as they roll me in and smiling as they roll me out, and smiling at the nurses and smiling at the food, which was good, by the way. And I was in the hospital for 8 days and I didn't stop smiling through the whole thing. And as a result, I had literally no pain. I didn't have to take opiates. I didn't have to take non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. I took, because they told me to take something, I took Tylenol for a week and then stopped because I didn't need it. And I found it's that expectation. Change the expectation, you change the outcome, you change the whole energy around it. So as a practitioner, Maureen, it sounds like you are, when someone is improving, if they do go through some sort of transition, don't language it, don't predict it, don't ever talk about what it's going to be. Keep them focused on their healing. Keep them focused on how far they've gone. You're the cheerleader, the ultimate cheerleader. And you not only keep them focused on it, but keep you focused on it. Don't have an expectation of it, because your thoughts are going to be, thoughts are trespassers. They invade other people and other things all the time. In many of my courses, I have people sending back and forth and with total strangers on Zoom, and they're picking up what other people are thinking. And so I would recommend that. On what to do if it's not working, break it down, make it smaller, do intentions for smaller things, and also get off of yourself. Many times with students of mine, if it's not working, I will say to them, get off of yourself. Do an intention for someone else, then come back and see what happens. And most of the time, the getting off of themselves proves to be the healer. And I mean, there's loads and loads of studies and science to demonstrate that, altruism is one of the biggest healers there is.
Yeah.
So anything you wanted to say about with transition periods, Sue?
The same, I've healed a scoliosis in my own system and healed migraine headaches and healed broken arms with traditional casting means, all because I completely knew, as I was discovering this felt sensation inside of the body and how we're supposed to be working with it, and I know now that there is no such thing as a false hope, that this potentiality is here and it is us, and we are to allow that to be true. Now, it is valuable for us to get into a training so that we are allowing ourselves, when we're being that cheerleader, to know what we're doing, how to be oriented inside of our system to truly gather this power and help facilitate that for others. So this program that Lynne is about to offer up, I can't encourage you enough to jump in on that, because of what you will learn about the how to become this oriented individual that is able to move this energy in this sort of a way. And when someone's intention is not working, perhaps they're setting too small of an intention. Perhaps their intention is too focused on healing the problem, when in actuality, one of the things we're trying to share with you here today is that there's actually not a problem. And it's our belief in the problem that is causing the symptoms, that is causing the diagnosis, that is causing us to try to learn to heal this thing. So what if you set your intention a little bigger about your wholeness and your magnificence and allowing yourself to be here on this planet in your fullness, and watch what happens. So maybe you're setting the bar too low when you're setting an intention that's not working. So maybe even just including this or something better, that would be helpful to keep the mind field open but focused. Then as it relates to people in their transition time, I would say that it is the most glorious way for you to be in the presence of someone who has been battling something for so long that their system is not able to land itself back here, but to be the steward of them leaving in a most profound and integrated way. The power of intention, even there, makes a literal transition from this physical life into our non-physical expression of ourselves. For that to happen with grace and ease happens as we begin to see that we are eternal beings. We are made of energy, and energy cannot be created or destroyed. And so we have never not been. And one of the experiences that I had in my exalted states of openings that started occurring 20 years ago was the recognition that I had always been here, and I was always going to be here, and that I was just focusing my attention into the physical realm and having this experience, but that I would receive my attention back into this exalted state again and again and again. And so when we're in the space of someone moving through a healing process where they're gathering all the parts of themselves back together again and starting to flow as an integrated individual, they're going to go through who knows what. But if you're holding this space and this alignment for knowing that it is all okay, and that we are coming in here and having a joyful experience of the divine here on earth, and then when that experience has drawn a completion, we recede out, collect ourselves, and come back in or go somewhere else for another experience. And when we can kind of sit in that place and hold that space for others, healing happens because a sense of okayness, a sense of relief enters into the field. And that sense of relief is the remembrance of the bigness of our beings. And Lynne and I are both so very interested in humanity, rediscovering that. We are being called to this at this time more than ever before in our lifetime. We're being called to realize a greater version of ourselves than we were allowing ourselves to be. So we call that healing and being a healer, but it's actually just remembering. But in courses like what Lynne is about to offer us is, it's remembering with clarity. It's remembering with an organized, systematic way of allowing infinite possibility to run through your life and into the lives of those that you are here to serve. So I'm thrilled that you're teaching the course, Lynne, and I'm thrilled to be able to support this type of conversation for all of humanity.
Thank you so much, Sue. I'm going to take one last question, and then sadly we have to wrap this up. But somebody has said she has a friend who has stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. She's getting worse from day to day, a lot of pain, she can't breathe. I'm thinking about a Power of 8 group. Does it make sense in turning her case to the Facebook group? I have a Facebook group called it's called Connecting and Healing Through the Power of 8. I set it up in the beginning of the COVID crisis so people could connect and heal during all of that. And she also asked about my intention for Sunday sessions. And also someone else, Luke, asked about those who are diagnosed with a cancer or life-changing disease. As Sue has said through here, and I heartily agree, there are no labels here. It is not necessarily life-changing, or even life-ending. I don't ever like that term. What I usually say about cancer is it's a bit of an inconvenience. And if you can get your mind around the idea that any of this can heal, as I say, my Power of 8 group has healed 2 people with stage 4 metastatic cancer. We've healed in our Power of 8 groups many hundreds of people with metastatic cancer, thousands perhaps. So cancer, with all of these things, one of the things I tell people to do is to do an intention around finding the practitioner as well that you want to work with. So that's another big one. And this practitioner needs to be that cheerleader we were talking about, and needs to understand a much broader and holistic view of the body, including energy. But also, I would really recommend Power of 8 groups in both cases for Claudia and Luke. that will give that patient hope. And hope, as Dr. Sue has said, is essentially the best medicine. Hope is the medicine. If you have nothing else, you need hope. And hope will turn it around. It certainly has turned around many people I've seen, including my own mother-in-law. So we have to go now. But it's taken, this hour has zipped by.
I know. It always goes too fast with you, Lynn.
Always
I
goes
just have
too
such a
fast.
blast.
But Sue, tell everybody about the courses you're giving, where to get you, where to find out more about you and your energy codes and the work you do.
Oh, sure. I'm pretty easy to find. drsuemorter.com. It's drsuemorter.com. And there are all types of courses of teaching you how to be practitioners and remote healers and the energy codes. I have a book facilitator program coming up that teaches you how to teach the work that I'm teaching, because I want us to pay it forward and to get out there and help humanity in every single way that we can. So I have a course with the Book Study Club training you. I create all kinds of videos and conversation starters and perspective builders that allow you to do such things. And then level 1 of my own coursework, if you want to drop in as a student to heal for yourselves, there's a whole part of the Institute that will serve you there as well. So you can find it, just check us out, and know that Lynn and I are both here for you in all ways possible to help serve humanity by healing ourselves, remembering the truth of who we are, and celebrating our magnificence, and letting that spread through our circles of influence, such as the Power of 8. So
thank you so much, Sue. And do check out all of her stuff and there's a free gift to look in the chat if you want to find out more about Dr. Sue. Now, for me, for people who don't know who I am, you can check me out at lynnmctaggart.com. And we've got all kinds of courses coming up. Become a Better Healer with the Power of 8, mainly focused on practitioners of every variety, from doctors and nurses to alternative practitioners to energy healing. It's all about your thoughts and words and your patient's thoughts and words, and how to really boost your own success rate. And of course, I do all kinds of levels of courses on intention. We'll be doing an intention essentials in the fall, and we've got our master class running all this year and much more. So check that out, and the new science and all the podcasts and things that I do. Anyway, so great to see you, Sue. So great to connect with you. I think the last time we saw you in person was about, I don't know, 2 years ago, maybe 2 years ago.
Yes, a couple of years. So,
yeah.
So we need to help the world heal itself so that we can all get back together in the same room and and enjoy each other once again in those ways.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. And
thank
you everybody for listening. I hope you really enjoyed this, and hope to see you soon.
Yes.
Take care now.
Much love, everyone.
Bye, everybody.